In employee-owned companies, wages are 33% higher, job tenure is 53% longer, and household net worth is 92% greater. So I think like if you're really stakeholder driven, it doesn't have to be your only stakeholder, but as you said, if your employees are a big motivator for you, odds are pretty good that if you go the employee ownership path, you're really going to make meaningful, positive change in your employee's life.
In this episode of Ethical Exits, we sit down with Cameron Madill, the founder of PixelSpoke, an employee-owned, award-winning web design and marketing agency. Cameron shares his inspiring journey fueled by a commitment to learning, impact, and meaningful relationships. He delves into the transition of his agency to a cooperative model driven by a vision of shared ownership and long-term stability. Cameron also reflects on overcoming the challenges of the recession, finding support within the B Corp community, and adopting a mission-driven approach to business. Tune in to hear how employee ownership boosts wages, commitment, and camaraderie, and why flexible cooperative structures can pave the way for inclusivity and growth. Did you know that Unilever's sustainable living brands, obtained through strategic acquisitions, expanded 69% faster than the rest of their portfolio? This business strategy isn't just for giants like Unilever. You too can execute a similar model to drive growth and impact. At Up & Over, we specialize in helping mission-driven companies grow by acquiring like-minded businesses. Ready to build your own portfolio of impact? With Up & Over, it's within reach. Visit upandoveradvisors.com to learn more. All right, welcome to Ethical Exits, the Everything M&A podcast for mission-driven companies. Today, we're really excited to have Cameron Madill with us as the founder of PixelSpoke, an award-winning marketing agency company based in Portland, Oregon. Cameron, after 20 years of running the company, took the courageous and inspiring step in 2020 to sell his fast-growing company to his employees. Creating a thriving cooperative, his leadership and spirit of economic advancement for all is a shining example of what is possible in an ethical exit. Cameron has received the Global Citizen of the Year Award from Entrepreneurs Organization, a worldwide group of over 12,000 leading entrepreneurs, for his work with refugees, and the B Economy Leader by the B Corp community for his work building local B Corp communities. Cameron continues to serve PixelSpoke on a coaching and advisory basis and lives in Portland, Oregon, with his wife, the accomplished entrepreneur, Anna Madill, and their young son. So welcome, Cameron. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me.
So, Cameron, you have a remarkable story. Not only is your professional journey with PixelSpoke something incredible to read about, but also in your personal commitment to making a positive impact. Whether it's through your leadership in the B Corp community or the inspiring decision, to transition your company to a cooperative model. It's clear that you're someone who I can find is deeply driven by a strong sense of purpose and principles. So to begin, Hannah and I, we'd love to hear from you. We want to know, who is Cameron and what are the values that you care most deeply about? And what are those key principles that really guide you in your day-to-day life?
Well, Caitlin, thank you for lobbing such a softball first question my way. Holy cow. All right.
We're really deep here. Yeah.
Yeah. No big deal. Just everything I am and what I believe in.
Let's just start there.
I think you captured a lot of my passions in that nice introduction. Thank you. I think, we have a really strong set of company core values and also family core values that really guide me, but you can really simplify them down to a passion for learning, impact, and relationships. And those are kind of the things that drive me and always have driven me. And so even though I've done a lot of sometimes perhaps slightly random looking things, I think that's the thread that connects all of them.
So your journey, incredibly inspiring, like I said. When did you decide to create PixelSpoke? When did this, decision come to you? Can you lead us on that journey from way back to the beginning?
Yeah, so it was first we started the company and we called it Inattack. And I will buy you an ice cream cone if you can spell that correctly. Do you want to try?
Inotech?
Well, yeah, you couldn't even remember it. Sinotac. Let's see. Can you spell it?
Okay, I'm gonna say I'll go. I'll go. SYN
Oh, so close, so close. You're like, you were within one letter. It was AC. But anyway, that's what you do. Yeah. This is how you name a company right after college when you've majored in history and physics. So the origin story really was, as I learned later, completely uninspiring to everyone but me. But I just really didn't want to work for anyone else. I took 2 years off from college in the middle to play music. I'm a jazz guitarist. It was a wonderful experience, but it taught me that I didn't want to be a professional musician because, one, I'm not all that talented, and two, it's a pretty rough life. And then I also too got to watch most of my friends graduate and go into all different professions, academia, nonprofits, Wall Street, tech startups, like you name it. And I don't know, I kind of watching that, I was like, none of it looked that great to me. And so I thought, well, I'd rather work for myself and, make a ton of mistakes, but at least, I'm kind of like, I'm the bozo I'm working for rather than working for some other one, someone else who doesn't know what they're doing. So that was deeply motivating to me, but obviously not to our employees as we grew. The other thing that was fun was I started the company with my dad, who was my co-founder. So we worked together for, almost 14 years, I want to say. My sister actually worked for us for 8 years. So that was kind of a unique and really special part of the journey, being able to work with my family. But additional milestones, as we grew, the recession, like a lot of folks, the Great Recession was a near-death experience. It taught me that we really had no business model. I didn't have a business background, so I didn't even know a lot of these terms. But it was kind of like, wow, some businesses actually did pretty well through the Great Recession. And for us, just the phone stopped calling. It was so close to bankruptcy and shutting things down and layoffs. So, that I think would really motivated me. I was already interested, but I was like, I really need to learn the tools of business. I mean, it's kind of Captain Obvious, but it's like, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, like, dedicate yourself. You may have been motivated by freedom and independence, but if your craft is business, you need to learn those tools. I think a few other key milestones coming out of that were, finding the community of certified B corporations. That really felt like finding my people in the business space. I think Entrepreneurs Organization, a little bit before that, was hugely influential as well, of like finding communities of other entrepreneurs and being able to kind of share the pains, the struggles, as well as the victories and the highs. And then in roughly 2016, we started focusing exclusively on credit unions as a company. And that was a big breakthrough because they're a really fun space to focus on because they're all impact driven. And so it's kind of fun to have, to go to a conference that your clients are attending and they're all sitting around trying to brainstorm new ways to like help the underserved. So it was really kind of rewarding as an area of focus, but I think it also let us deliver a lot more value. And then of course, the final two chapters, if we really simplified, say we're converting to a co-op at the end of 2019, and then I stepped down as CEO at the end of last year. So that'd be our story.
So you started this business in the year 2000, if I'm following the timeline, or 1999.
Yeah, 2003. I'm not quite as old as you guys pegged me, so.
Okay, 2003, and so you're out of college. You didn't study business. You studied history and physics, if I heard you correctly. You started a media company, right? And marketing and advertising, but you really specialize in websites. If I can I say it that way? So you started it with your dad and also with the sibling. Who was the expert in website design? Like, where did this idea even come from, or this practice, or this, thought that you could be experts in this area, this business service?
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So my sister joined a couple years later. My dad, I should say this was a really poorly thought out plan. I think you're probably trying to like assume a level of wisdom and expertise that there was not. But we had kind of, my dad had a really successful career in technology. So he had worked for a variety of tech companies, mostly based in the Bay Area. And then he was getting kind of ground down. He had loved his second to last job. And then his last job, IBM acquired that company. And so the whole culture changed. He's driving out to the suburbs. He's working 70-hour weeks.
Wow.
It really started impacting his health. So, so it was like for him, probably the opportunity to work with me and to code, because he never was able to do much programming in his career because he got promoted it's like if you're a a programmer and you have people skills, you get promoted real fast to manager, which he was really good at, but I think he really wanted to code. And he had sort of, reached a point of I think just financial security that he didn't really need to worry much about making money. And I really just didn't want to work for anyone else. So like I said, brilliant business plan. Of course, if we knew then what we know now, we never would have done it. But then I wouldn't be here today if I had known that then. So.
No, I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily true, Cameron. I mean, I think that you never control, and you're never in control, right? But you just don't know what leads to next, right? And your path was your path, and you took advantage, I think, and my understanding of kind of a golden opportunity, right? Where you had a willing business partner, your dad, someone that you trusted, right? And he kind of helped create that bridge for you where you could work for yourself, right? You could take that non-traditional path. So I think that's pretty interesting. And it goes back to, I think, two of the themes that you talked about as far as your value system, impact and family, right? Certainly family was there from the very beginning for you. And as you leaned into this business model, you decided to niche, right? Which is also an interesting business choice, really focusing on one area. Focusing on credit unions, I'm sure, as you shared, was like not part of the original business plan, but it turned into something really great for you, really sticky. And I'm sure, as in our experience as well, once you focus on something, if you build a reputation, the power of referral becomes a real thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So business at that point, not that it was easy, but you gain expertise building websites and offering services to a particular segment of the business community. And it allowed you to lean into your values and what you cared most about, which one of those was impact. And this allowed you to do that. So the learnings along the way, but making it through the Great Depression and also creating a digital service product kind of at the height of when all this stuff was like brand new, right? Like having a website was still kind of like a nuanced thing. And it's totally different than where it is today with these online AI driven platforms. Anybody can go on and create a website. I know, because I am not skilled at all and I did it.
Yep.
Right. For my business. But back then, like you did have to have a programmer, right? It was like, WordPress
Very
was still fairly nascent. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Very interesting.
I just want to clarify, though. You said Great Depression, and I'm only 45. You guys keep trying to make me older. It was the Great Recession.
The Great Recession, yes. Yep. That's true. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Good call out, Cameron.
This was the beginning of the end for me. Cameron just got way too much joy out of me making this simple and very plausible mistake. Depression, recession, same word, whatever, different times, get it, different problems, kinda. He'll keep coming back to this over and over. Let's count this as number one and see how many times he does it over the course of this episode.
See, Cameron, this is why we have video as a backup, so everyone can know that you're not as old as we're claiming you to be.
120.
Yeah. And you were saying you got introduced to the B Corp community. Was that just through networking with other entrepreneurs in the Bay Area? Like you said, they introduced you, that community. How did that introduction happen?
Yeah, great question. It came actually through a really wonderful entrepreneur here in Portland, Oregon, Janelle Etzel, who's the founder and owner of Living Room Realty, and they have a couple sibling companies. And I was in a business group with her, and I remember hearing about it and just being like, whoa, that sounds really cool. And then immediately just being like, we could never do that. We're I don't know, just we're not legit. We don't have enough impact. We're not, we have good intentions, but we don't know how to execute on them. We're barely getting through the day. And she invited me and a few other colleagues to a B Corp happy hour that someone was organizing locally. And it was great. Really it was like one of those things that the co-op was similar, but where I just was like, I want to do this. Like I just immediately knew it. And I kept learning, but it was sort of one of those great, I'm in. What is this? But I never really strayed from that. It was like an instant fit.
That's funny that you say that, because Hannah and I and Up and Over Advisors right now, we're on our journey to becoming B Corp certified. And I just attended my first convention for the B Corp Southeast community a few weeks
Cool.
ago. And it was
Yeah.
the first time that I've been to a convention where I was welcomed with open arms
Yeah.
and everyone wanted to talk to me and vice versa. And it was definitely a career-changing experience, I would say, because you're not familiar with that type of engagement in corporate America. So I was moved similarly like you were. So, up until this point, now you're thinking, all right, I think I want to restructure or reshape PixelSpoke. How you decide to make that decision to take the company and sell it back to your employees?
So just kind of the process we went through, or my own journey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, I guess like I said about B Corp, it was sort of one of those cases where like the heart knows and then the head justifies over time. But I heard about it at a B Corp. I think it must have been the Champions Retreat. And I was working, which is their kind of big annual, used to be global, now it's kind of North America. It's regional now. And yeah, there was this guy, Blake Jones, who's a really neat guy. I was doing a variety of leadership things in the community. And so we had started crossing paths and I just liked him. He was just a cool guy. And I knew he was like, I was like, I think he's the CEO. I didn't quite understand, but I knew he ran a big solar company, like 100 plus people. And he mentioned several times that they were an employee cooperative. And we were always focused on other things, so it was like we were talking about other stuff, but I would hear him introduce himself or maybe, it would come up. And, so it kind of dawned on me. I kept spending time with him at this conference and I was like, hey, Blake, what is this employee cooperative thing? Like, is that a thing like we could do? Like, I knew absolutely nothing about it. I had never heard about it in any of my entrepreneur groups. I hadn't even heard about it in B Corp, and I'd done quite a bit in that space. And so, but it's just like it sounded cool. It sounded right. And I think I had started developing a perspective, and this is what I always like to at least, suggest as a perspective for other entrepreneurs, that, we all leave our business someday, whether it's head first or feet first. And the sooner we start thinking about it, the more intentional we can be about it, and the more likely it'll have like an ending that we're happy with. And so I just kind of had this sense. I was probably I must have been mid-30s. And I just was like, I think like maybe I've got another decade. I don't have 2 decades in me. I don't have 15 years in me. Like I didn't have like I still felt kind of energetic and vital before I turned 120 like I am today. And I love that. Great depression. My granddad would be so happy. I digress. So yeah, I just had this sense like, and it wasn't even actually so much age related. It was just like, I'd been doing my business for probably 10 years at that point, over 10 years. And it was just like, I wanted to do other stuff. I think we all had many chapters in us. So those things kind of aligned, and the business had really started to have a lot of success, on many dimensions. So I was feeling kind of financially a lot more comfortable and secure, and probably just more secure in myself, less trying to prove anything to someone else. So yeah, it just sounded right. We had some follow-up calls. 2018 was abysmal, probably my hardest year in business. It's certainly in the last decade. And so I really had to put it on hold, which was hard for me because I like to move relatively fast when I know what I want to do. But I could just tell it was the wrong, nobody wanted to talk about cooperative ownership in 2018. We were kind of questioning if the business model was going to work, and the culture broke, and it was just rough. But at the end of 2018, I remember I was kind of like, I can't wait any longer. So I shared it with our then leadership team in fourth quarter planning about this time of year, and got kind of a mixed response, but let's say guardedly positive, which is kind of how our team often works. And then told the entire company. We did a retreat in Mexico, January 2019, told the entire company.
Wow.
And then spent the year kind of laying the groundwork, converted. Obviously, 2020, things did not go according to plan. I took 3 months of family leave when our son was born. There was obviously that thing called COVID. There was George Floyd's murder. There was just a lot going on. So it really sidetracked our plans. But, we had made the conversion, which on some levels is, it's a necessary step to becoming a high functioning co-op. And then really, I think in 2021, we kind of learned how to norm and function at a high level as a co-op. So I think that's maybe the journey. And maybe the last thing I'll add is, And I think this is a huge advantage. I just gave a presentation about this yesterday that a lot of entrepreneurs don't understand about employee ownership. One of the biggest advantages is normally when you sell, your succession plan is tied to that sale. With employee ownership, you can really stagger it however you want. And I think it's really hard to change ownership and leadership at the same time. It's doable, but I hear these stories of people who sell their company and they walk in and tell the whole company like, hey, just so you know, I sold the company. My email is going to be shut down at 3 p.m. today, but feel free to text me if you want to connect. Good luck. And it just feels so to me, kind of heart-wrenching if we put all this time into something to have that kind of transition. So what was cool was we were able to really figure out this new ownership structure and then focus on the succession plan for almost 2 years. And I think that made it a really fantastic succession, high functioning succession plan, because we could kind of focus on one in turn. And I also think people don't feel like I pulled a fast one over on them.
Yeah, no, 100%. So that's really fascinating, Cameron. I want to talk more about that, but I want to have an understanding a little bit more about the shape of the company at this point, right? You started in 2003. You started with your dad. Your sibling came on a few years later. You transition, you focus, you niche, you're getting more involved in the B Corp community, you're having great success. Websites at this point are everybody needs a website, right? So customers are more plentiful than they were when you first started. You're learning all this stuff about business in and outs, how to sell, how to manage your books, how to do all these things, how to market, right?
Sure.
All that stuff you got from just the reps. So talk to us about the shape, how big was the company at this point? How many clients did you have? How many employees? What do we look like at this point?
Yeah, so when we converted, we were probably 1.8 million in revenue.
Okay.
And we were part of the reason it worked was we had a 6-year run we just had a good business model. So we had a 6-year run of 16 to 20% profits.
Wow,
and
that's great.
We probably had 14 people. I'm a little fuzzy on the exact numbers. Today, the company is 16 people and a little under 3 million in revenue.
Oh my God.
And they're about to hire 2 people. They've just been trying to time that correctly. So yeah. So those are kind of the details.
Yeah. So your SG&A is really held, but your profit or your top line revenue has grown quite a bit, right? So only a couple more hires, but you're almost at 2x of what your revenue was. That's tremendous. So that also highlights, I think, what you're talking about, why this can be such a strategic home run when you're looking to exit. And it sounds like from what you said, you were looking to exit, or you had started to think about it, or maybe this friend you met at the B Corp, Blake, you said his name was, the guy who ran the solar company, maybe he inspired you to start thinking about what that could potentially look like. And there are lots of different ways that you can turn into a cooperative or an ESOP. It doesn't mean that you have to leave. Right? You can still be a full-fledged member of the cooperative, but you can also use it as an exit strategy. And I think what's really genius about this model, and there are a ton of tax benefits, and you probably know more about them than I do. I'm still very much a novice in this process, and you are serving as one of my primary teachers. But that in a lot of exits, employees, as you said, are secondary, or they're a thought that's really not top of mind, right? People are looking at the enterprise value of a company, but there's not a big connection, or people don't really correlate what enterprise value means and how that relates to the employees, right? The value that the employees bring. And what you were able to accomplish, if I'm following you correctly, is you were able to provide your staff, those critical members of your team that were providing the value of the company every single day, right? Those who were doing the work and creating and preserving value month over month, year over year, you were able to build their trust, right? That look, Cameron does care about us. He wants to give something back to us. He wants to make us owners in this thing that he had built. So that's huge. And you were able to retain them, right? So it was almost like a double down effect. You didn't have to go out and pay them more, right, from a salary perspective or from a payroll perspective, but the value that you provided them through this ownership structure helped them kind of double click and lean in further, right, to being a member of PixelSpoke, right? That became a competitive advantage for you with your staff, right? It was a retention tool as well.
Yep.
Which preserves the value for you. Because if you would have walked away, right, sold the company to your employees, And a lot of them left based on the structure as you described it. This was a 24-month transition plan, right? If the value could have been vacuumed out by the employees themselves, if they would have been unhappy, right?
Yes.
So no,
I agree with everything. Sorry.
no, so I think that's really interesting and really smart, and it's not something that people think a lot about, especially where you were, Cameron, from a revenue perspective. A lot of folks think that they can't even explore an exit, that there's no value to sell, that people won't even be interested unless they have enterprise value of $5 million plus. Right? That's not a common misnomer, right? That they can't talk to private equity. There's going to be nobody who's going to be interested in their business. Maybe it'll be like a serendipitous strategic where they meet another website development company or another marketing company and they say, cool, plug in, right? As like a vertical roll up, right? But this was really interesting because I do think, and I would like your opinion on this, that this model of transition or of just a different way to structure the company, are there any limits to how and when you can transition to a co-op or to an employee-owned company?
Okay, are there any limits?
Yeah.
For sure, if you go, so if folks have heard the term ESOP, employee stock ownership plan, I don't know a lot about them because that's not our model, but I consistently hear you kind of need real rough numbers like 5 million revenue, 1 million in EBITDA, 40 plus employees. So it's definitely you need to be a more mid-sized company. Co-ops, I think that there's not, nobody has a magic formula, but I think you basically need a stable business, with kind of a good track record of success and low debt and 10 plus employees. I'm quoting that from a group called Project Equity that specializes in co-ops. And the thing is, like, you could do it smaller, but at a certain point, like I remember when we were like 4 or 5 people, like we kind of basically were a co-op, right? I mean, a lot of companies in the early days function on a highly cooperative model and everything's kind of consensus driven. But I think as an exit strategy, I agree. You can be much smaller than a lot of other models, but you need a certain amount of size and scale.
Okay, I think that's really helpful, especially the folks we talk to most often. They tend to be, especially in the B Corp community, right? There's some monster B Corps, but a lot of the B Corps are pretty small, right? Mission-driven entrepreneurs tend to be pretty small. A lot of solopreneurs even. Okay, so that was one thing that I was doing a little bit of research on of finding the right path and the right structure and protecting your mission. So what was the mission of PixelSpoke? Had you guys drafted that? I'm sure that changed over the years, but.
Yeah, good question. I think our mission has changed probably since we converted. So I think today it is basically, I'm not going to get the exact words right because I don't work there anymore, but it's something like to promote the cooperative economy and elevate our clients' digital presence. Okay. So it's really like thinking about systemically, like how do we promote a different way of doing capitalism? So that really is kind of like living the cooperative structure and promoting the cooperative structure. But then, of course, our clients are cooperatives. And so not losing sight of the fact that, maybe the single most important thing that we do to promote a cooperative economy is by helping credit unions to have great, accessible, inclusive websites.
Oh, very cool. I love how those two pair together. So it's internal and it's external. What we create for ourselves is what we want for the world.
Yep. Exactly.
If I can encapsulate that. Okay. So one of the things I was learning about, because I did a little bit of pre-research on this, Cameron, of like all the different ways that you can establish a cooperative. And one of the key ones was this idea around fairness. So how do you structure what it means to be an owner? What are the benefits of that? Is that like a 7-to-1 ratio boundary around salaries, right? Like no one makes more than 7x, right? Or is it more flat? Or is it more like you eat what you kill? So the revenue you bring in, you get a good portion of that, right? One worker, one vote, right? All those kind of like different ways that you can structure it. And then also, of course, that bleeds into onboarding and your general bylaws around that. Because I saw on your website, a good portion of people are owners. But then there are people that are not owners. So if you could talk to us a little bit about how you kind of landed on that structure, and if you did that together with your employees and you all voted, or how that worked.
Yeah, great. Thank you for another softball question. Okay, let's see. Let's cover the entire cooperative movement. So I think that the first thing people need to know is that it's an incredibly flexible structure.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot of preconceptions about what a cooperative is in the US because we don't have as robust of a cooperative economy here as in certain other parts of the world. And especially when it comes to employee cooperatives.
Let's just even define that. What do you mean when you say cooperative economy?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so at a basic level, cooperatives are governed by 7 cooperative principles. And let's see if I can remember all of them off the top of my head. I think I would say probably the most important ones are that they're democratically controlled by their members. So you don't have this kind of the people with the most shares have the most power. And then they're restricted to a specific kind of member. So if it's an employee or worker cooperative, it's the people who work there. If it's like, say, a credit union or a food co-op, it's the consumers who patronize it. Okay. You can also have things like producer cooperatives, like, coffee farms who come together to have a single brand. Or you have cooperatives where it's actually the members are people who are coming together to pool their buying power. They're buying things and getting better rates. So at the core, it's this notion of, democratic member control that makes a co-op different, one member, one vote from other structures. But in practice, yeah, you can define membership in all sorts of different ways. Once the co-op gets to a certain size, take a credit union as a great example. You don't have a, On Point, for example, which, has hundreds of thousands of members. They don't have like all their members show up to a board meeting. That's insane, right? And they're not that invested to come to a board meeting every month or every quarter. So, at that level, right, and they do a great job of this. You've got, you have members who are electing people to show up on the board, and you've got committees. And so that, these are all democratic institutions. It's all the stuff we learned in high school civics class. And it's just like, if you look at like quote unquote democratic governments around the world, you see a huge diversity of how they're structured, even, cities or counties or states inside of the US, right? So you just have a lot of latitude in how you design it. You touched on membership, so like qualifications. So that's a big design decision. Some co-ops, I'm going to talk about employee co-ops because that's what I know the most about. But you can apply this to other models. So for an employee cooperative, one of the key decisions is how much does that share cost? And what do you need to do to be eligible? So there are employee cooperatives where like day one or 3 months in, it's like $25 and you're a member with full rights. That's a design decision, right? And that means it's highly inclusive. You have a huge percentage of folks who become members of the cooperative, or maybe it's mandatory. There's some places where they wait a year or so, but if you don't join, you leave the company. So that's like an interesting design decision. At PixelSpoke, we set it fairly high. This was kind of my own personal belief for our business model, what would work the best. But we have a 3-year wait before you're eligible to join the co-op. It's a $10,000 buy-in, so it's meant to be kind of enough that it makes you really think, but it's still achievable. And then we have a roughly 6-month candidate period. So we have a lot of trainings we take people through, and that's all setting people up to be really effective, responsible owners who can maximize their contribution and therefore maximize the value they get from the organization. I think I answered your original question, but maybe not. That's what I have to say for now. So
that was very good. And I know I'm asking a lot because I think that there's just people don't know about this, Cameron. I mean, you didn't, right? We don't,
totally
right?
Didn't.
And I think that this is such a powerful vehicle because I think it really gets to the heart of what the triple bottom line movement is all about and what B Corps are really all about, right? It's about raising the tide for all ships. And this is such an interesting way to do it because it does really put forward and value the employee contribution and allow them to get a fair take. And I think that's what, if you look at all the things that are going on, and there's so many things that we could say, we're in another cycle that was very similar to the one that you described around 2019, 2020. There's some things that'll be happening in a month, right, that are like really freaky. And I think mostly on both sides, in our polarized binary political system and faith at this point, I'll describe them as that, like religious faith, that really at the heart of what people are upset about is, I think, this unfairness in the economic system, and I really worry about it even more, as we look forward into how disruptive artificial general intelligence will be, where the people who own this technology, they're going to be the ones who get paid out, and the rest of us who turn into like non-usable bots because we are human and we have our needs are so much higher than a robot or than a line of code. Who knows what's going to happen? right? So this is just, I think it's just such, I'm so glad that you're here, that you're talking to us about this, and just even sharing a little bit of insight about what it could look like and how to approach it and how approachable it can be. And I think that your earlier point of like, look, you might be 5 years out from being done, right? And you were kind of there. You were like, maybe I have a couple more years, but I can't do another decade, right? So I'm going to start exploring what this could look like, put it together. But you were excited about it, and you were able to execute it in a relatively shorter time frame. And I think that you got lucky when you did, because if you waited after COVID, it probably would have prolonged. You probably would have ended in a different position today. So you kind of like squeaked it in there, and then your team learned some big lessons, because they took over. This is a new structure right when everything was kind of on fire. So I'm sure that really was some hardship that was hard won, but learned a lot, right? And it kept the business going. And a lot of that, again, it's like because you had reliable employees. So I just want to ask one more question on this, because I think it's really important. And the way that you described that you guys were on the higher end of qualification. You had to be there for 3 years, and they had a 6-month wait period, and they had to like pay like legit money. Right? Like this is not a freebie, right? It wasn't a given after that. When you first converted, then did you just kind of do that retroactively for the people that were already there? Did they still have to buy in for the people that were there for 3 years? Oh, wow.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. No, I mean, it was 3 years at PixelSpoke.
Yeah, 3 years at PixelSpoke. So when you converted into a co-op, people who'd been there 3 years were automatically in.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Yeah, we had four people who were eligible and several who became eligible in the next year. Yeah.
Okay. And how do you feel, or do you have, I'm sure you guys have probably done analysis on this, but as far as retention, how has that impacted? I mean, how many people move forward and like dig it out, or how many people are just like, this isn't worth it, I'm going to go do something else?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I feel great about that. We always have had, I think, a pretty good culture and pretty good retention. I mean, always quite good. We had to measure this for B Corp, and you just kind of know it as a business owner, obviously. But it's almost a little eerie. I will knock on wood, knock, knock. We have not had a person leave since kind of spring 2021. And I think, look, I mean, I really appreciate kind of the passion that you guys bring to this topic, and I am deeply passionate about it. I'm also like a little skeptical because, living it, it's like, well, but nothing is perfect, right? And actually, in my experience, anytime I start to think something is perfect is when like I'm about to get punched in the face. So figuratively, for the most part, I don't think I've been punched in the face in a long time.
Yeah.
And so like we got lots of problems. We got lots of things we have to get better at. We have lots of things, that we're maybe not doing as well as we could. But that being said, it's a pretty awesome place to work. I loved my 4 years as the CEO of a cooperative were probably my favorite years as a CEO because the camaraderie, the commitment, the action, just so much of the BS in the workplace just disappeared. And there's still some, right? Because that's life. Nothing's perfect. But yeah, it's been, hopefully there aren't like 8 people who quit tomorrow. But I mean, yeah, 2.5 years plus with no one leaving is, I think, probably a great testament. And I wanted to sneak this in because you mentioned employee impact. So according to one data set from the National Center for Employee Ownership, so obviously they are kind of biased in this direction, but they seem, having poked a lot, I'm not a member, and they seem like a highly reputable group. In employee-owned companies, wages are 33% higher, job tenure is 53% longer, and household net worth is 92% greater. So I think like if you're really stakeholder driven, it doesn't have to be your only stakeholder, but as you said, if your employees are a big motivator for you, odds are pretty good that if you go the employee ownership path, you're really going to make meaningful, positive change in your employee's life.
That's fantastic. Thinking about unexpected lessons, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but like, I would imagine if I were in your shoes, even on those hard days when you had hard decisions to make, being a cooperative, at least you had everyone was bought in, and you could ping ideas off of more people. I'm sure it didn't feel as lonely. Is that a fair assessment? Because everyone's kind of like tied to the same boat?
Yeah, I mean, speaking for myself, I think one of the things I like to make sure people know is that there's all this stuff out there about how lonely it is being, Harvard Business Review did this article on how we have a loneliness recession, right? But we actually have a loneliness recession of CEOs as well. They said something like, over 50% of CEOs describe themselves as quite lonely. And there's a lot of, on On the other hand, CEOs are a pretty well-off bunch, and so they have a lot more support than a lot of other lonely people. So there's that caveat, but it's real. I mean, I think it can be a very isolating and difficult job and hard on people's mental health. And I would say, if we think carefully, I would say that for me at least, those 4 years, especially the last 2, were just incredible with the level of connection I felt at work and the no longer needing to kind of put on a bit of a mask. Like we one of our core values is authenticity, and I felt, even before the conversion, I felt grateful for how much I could sort of show up as myself. But I felt like after the conversion, I could really, it's not 100%, right? We all self-censor. We all think things that we shouldn't, utter out of our mouth, right? That's part of the human condition. But, whatever that sort of, wherever that spectrum is, I felt so close to kind of being fully myself at work those last 4 years that it was just awesome. It was a much better way to show up at work. So yeah, pretty special. And I think the rest of the team would say that as well to varying degrees, but of course I can't really speak their experience.
I love that for you. That is so freaking cool. That is like the holy grail, I think, of the personal experience, to feel free to be your authentic self. I think there's so much power in that. That's super cool, Cameron. I'm so stoked for you.
Thank you.
Any other unexpected lessons?
Yeah, well, okay, in my 120 years on planet Earth, I've learned a lot.
You're never going to let that go, man. You're not going to let that go.
There's a running joke in my family about how my granddad was a child of the Great Depression because he was
I see. I played into this.
Yeah, like boxes of toothpaste caps and, like all kinds of crazy stuff. And the funny thing is he was not actually a child of the Great Depression, but it became our joke. Okay, so back to the topic. 2 things, when I think about unexpected lessons, stand out. The first one was, you mentioned tax advantages.
Yeah.
I don't think there actually are very many for co-ops. If there are, I ran the opposite direction. So I really blew it from a tax standpoint. I didn't really pay any attention to it, and I had some pretty painful consequences. And my learning was, as owners, I think we're always used to wearing a bunch of different hats. And it got even more confusing when it was like, am I Cameron, the CEO, wearing the hat of sole owner? I hate it when people talk about themselves in third person. Let's just say, all right. Am I me, wearing my hat as sole owner? Am I wearing it as CEO? Am I wearing it as future CEO of a cooperative entity? Am I wearing it as a future member of a cooperative? It just got way too confusing. And so I really wish I would have hired, like a CPA or finance person and said, your job is exclusively to represent me as an individual and my family and, my wife and all of that. But like zero, I don't want to hear anything about PixelSpoke's interests because we'll do that with someone else. Right. But I think I could have built, one of our core values is everybody wins. And actually, I know I could have built a better everybody wins financial conversion for the company if I had thought that way. Wow. And I just, I didn't. No one told me that. So that's something I would strongly recommend. And the other thing is, it's related to that. I think one of the coolest things that came out of the conversion was we started bringing on some impact investors. And creating an investor deck was one of the best exercises I ever did. I wish I would have done it earlier. Even if it's kind of this whole notion of having a business that is built to sell. And it was fascinating because I'd done a ton of slide decks, for clients, for new employees, for quarterly planning, for, whatever, right? I'd done a million slide decks about PixelSpoke. But I remember when I sat down and I was like, whoa, this is going to an investor who, cares about our impact, but also like, they're putting a bunch of money into the company, and they really, I would be very nervous and stressed if I were to do that as an outsider. So they need to see a very specific kind of like data and proof. And so I think that kind of, the whole idea of if we build our businesses so that they're ready to be sold, then we have all this freedom because we'd actually be really happy running it because it's a lucrative going concern, or we'd be happy selling it, and we have all these options. And I just see this again and again with second time or third time entrepreneurs. It's like from day one, even if they're in it from the long haul, they're thinking, what does that exit look like? Because I'm not going to live, last time I'll say this, to be 120, right? So someone else is going to take over or it's going to get shut down.
Yeah.
And even if they're really competent, as you've talked about a lot, they might not care about the employees. They might not care about the purpose. They might not care about your culture. They may not care about your clients. And so having that built to sell mindset from day one, or, if the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago and the second best time is today, adopting that mindset today and building that deck just forced me to really grapple with some of that stuff that I thought I had a handle on. And we sort of did, but it was powerful.
Wow. I really love that. And I don't know if this is right or wrong, Cameron, but the way I think about this option and an exit, I don't know if this is even like fair to say, but I don't know. I kind of feel it. It's like a back door, It's like I don't have to mess with outside people. I can just look inwards, right? And see all the values there and say, look, we built this together, right? I mean, even the most powerful, most influential CEO, and I think about this a lot with Tesla and what Elon is doing, is like I cringe for his employees because it's not just him. He didn't create all the value, right? He's had some really smart, dedicated people who've been like laid their whole life on the line, probably missed their children's births, based on all the rumors on how Elon runs his companies, So to turn inward and be like, look, you guys, you have tremendous value. You've earned this. Maybe we can do this together. We don't have to go to an outside entity where, like you said, you lose more control. It's maybe a faster exit for you. You might say, hey, please retain my employees, but at the end of the day, you're not in control of that.
Yep.
I really think it's just kind of like, if I were in that position, and I hope one day, knock on wood, we are, right, that we build our little choo-choo train, that it would be a huge sigh of relief. And that would be the first indicator to me that I built a good company. Because if I built a good company, what it means is that it doesn't just rely on me, that it can survive when I'm outside of the room because I've hired the right people and I've empowered them, right? And they're committed.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I think you were a preacher in another life. So yeah, I support all of it. No, I'm sure
very good with words.
Yeah, I think that's well put.
And
I just have one more question, Caitlin.
Oh yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Sorry, because I want to really nail this for folks. I want this to be as practical as possible for people. So, if you were in a position to do this again, right? Where would you start? I heard you say that you would maybe have a different CPA representation, which is important. You would build this deck. You thought that was really cool, right? And that was really informative and help you kind of set the path. But where would you start, like this journey? What resources would you rely on?
Yeah, I mean, I think at a basic level, there's three things you need. You need good finance people. So that should be your tax advisor, CPA, wealth manager, whatever that is, maybe a combination. You need a good lawyer. There's a really great one here in Portland. Let's see if I can, oh my gosh.
For the bylaws.
You need a lawyer for the bylaws, but I think the best ones can really help you with thinking strategically about how to structure the acquisition. I was like, what is her last name? Because she's amazing. So Alex Devendra from Align Law here in Portland is excellent. There's also a firm out of Colorado called J.R. Weiner, and they're the ones we used. That would have been nice. I just didn't know Alex at that time. So she's, but they're both great. But I think getting a lawyer who specializes in cooperative structures. And then lastly, I think you really need like a culture consultant or maybe somebody who's going to help the whole process, because it is a gigantic change in how we do business. So I love this organization called Project Equity. There's other great folks who can specialize in this, but they're out of Oakland. I just think they are dynamic. They are really smart. They really kind of know how to find that kind of middle path between head and heart. I've been to a bunch of their conferences. I think the world of them. I really wish we would have used them up front. But again, I didn't know they existed, and I was probably too cheap. So that's what I would say of like lining up those three people. I would probably start with Project Equity though, because the legal and financial strategy, those are subsets of the overall strategy. And so I think having someone who can really be your quarterback, which is someone like Project Equity, is really critical. And I think I tend to vastly overestimate my ability to homebrew something, and I like to learn, as I said. So it can be good, but it can be a real weakness. And when you're talking about a transaction that's going to be hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, like don't cheap out. I really wish I would have just said, I'm going to budget $50,000. Maybe we don't use it all, but I want to get the best people because you're probably not going to sell companies all that often. And the first time you're probably going to be pretty dumb about it, as I certainly was. So that's like kind of Captain Obvious, but I didn't do it. And I think entrepreneurs, we tend to, a lot of us got to where we are by figuring stuff out with, duct tape and bubble gum. But I think when it comes to selling your company, I wouldn't recommend duct tape and bubble gum.
Love it. So helpful. Thank you, Cameron.
Yeah.
And I think taking it back from the beginning too, you were able to provide your employees with what you said was one of the most important factors of your journey when you first started, which was having the control and choice of your work life. So like autonomy.
Yeah.
So it comes full circle.
Love that.
But no, that's fascinating. Thank you for being so transparent and thorough with us too. But
yeah, my pleasure.
So you have since stepped down as an advisory, or excuse me, in an advisory role. Was it this year that started?
Yeah, January 1 this year. So
okay. So now that you're working as an advisor for PixelSpoke, where's your focus elsewhere? What's the new venture for Cameron?
Besides being a dad.
Yeah, I mean, being a dad,
and a very wise old man.
Yeah, I don't know. For 120, I should have a lot more wisdom. I guess I lied. I said I wasn't going to make that joke, but you egged me on. So, yeah, there's a couple. There's probably two main areas I've ended up focusing. So the first one is in 2023, I was working half-time, and I was like a high school senior. I had this list of things I thought I might want to do next, but there was only one thing on the list which really emerged, which was couples work. I did a bunch of trainings. I started leading couples workshops. I ended up starting and finishing this year a project to interview 100 couples where at least one of them was an entrepreneur. And a lot of that came out of kind of the initial passion for relationships, and then realizing like, oh, my wife and I are both entrepreneurs and we're juggling businesses and our relationship and a child and family and all that. And that like there's a lot of people who've written about business and a lot of people who've written about relationships, but not a ton about the intersection. So that's kind of been one area that I'm really focused on. I've finished a book proposal. It sounds like it's very slow. So it sounds like in 2026 I'll have a book. But yeah, so I'm just really passionate about that, and I've been doing some speaking and some work around that. And then the other thing I've done is I started a master's in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, it's kind of like the study of all the good things in life, character, strengths, purpose, positive emotions. And it's not to say that the difficult things in life don't matter. It's just kind of that a lot of psychology has been driven towards focus on the negative. Yeah, absolutely. Right. And it's a focus on the negative because, of course, the negative does have such a big impact on our life, and we're biologically wired to focus on the negative. And then you have incentives like insurance companies needing to be able to code people as reimbursable or not for something like therapy. So that drove a lot of the funding, and that stuff all matters a ton. It's just that other side was to some extent neglected. So I'm loving that program. It's basically like all the things I love doing in my company. It's the things I love doing when I coach people or facilitate planning sessions. It's the things I do in the nonprofit space. It's everything. It's what I do with my family, right? So I just love that kind of focus on well-being, and that, kind of the core notion is that thriving or flourishing is not just the absence of the bad. I think we've all had the experience where I'll speak personally, falling into a deep depression. And when I got out of that, oh my gosh, that was wonderful. But also that wasn't kind of the extent of my potential or my capacity. It was a necessary first step, but there's actually kind of a different set of skills and tools to reach our highest potential. So that's me.
What a cool way to spend your time. That's so neat.
I am loving it, although I'm going to go finish a statistics assignment after this podcast. So, there's a light side and dark side to everything.
Oh, academia,
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, that was beautiful, and we're really excited for you and your new endeavor. But Hannah and I always like to wrap up these podcast episodes and give you a platform to promote and talk about your favorite charity or your cause of choice, and just something that's like really close to your heart, something that you want to highlight and just give more attention to.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many causes. I mean, B Corp, I could go on and on, but I think the one I picked was certainly one of my favorites. It's a nonprofit that I'm on the board of today called Innovation Law Lab. And I first started working with them almost a decade ago, and they were doing really amazing work providing pro bono legal support, legal counsel to refugees. Today, they've really evolved into two areas. One is they're a key part of supporting universal representation for immigrants in Oregon, which has never been done before, and I think is kind of a bold and audacious thing. And I'm just a big believer in the importance of justice and access. Immigration obviously has become such a polarized, heated emotional issue. But I just think at a basic level, we all deserve access to fair representation. And then the other thing they do that I would actually recommend people support, because it's the area that needs the most financial support right now, is they have a program called Anti-Carceral Legal Organizing, which is about figuring out how we can have these small communities that are dependent upon prisons, often private prisons, for their economy. And they kind of get trapped in this cycle. And how can we help those communities to develop economic plans so that, because, on the whole, and I've volunteered in some of these private prisons, the employees are really depressed. It is not a fun job, not feel good. They're often really just kind of the worst of, like, it's like anti-B Corp. It's like business is a force. They're not even doing a good job at their arguably, negative mission in the world. Hugely wasteful, hugely, harmful to the people who are incarcerated and the employees. So that's where I've been making my donations, is to the acronym is ACLO. So to the ACLO program at innovationlawlab.org.
Wow. Super cool, Cameron. I can't imagine. I mean, that where your revenue model depends on people being incarcerated to support your community.
Talk on that one.
Wild.
So it's really depressing stuff, because it's like they have everything you'll see in any business. They have HR programs, they have employees of the month, they have KPIs, they have strategic plans.
Whoa, so corporate. Jeez.
Yeah, well, it's it's how you run a business, but it's surreal to see these things in operation.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, thank you for giving a spotlight to those communities and those people. I think Hannah and I can both agree that our last few guests, along with yourself, Cameron, have given a voice to people that you don't regularly hear about or get any attention. So we're hoping that our listeners, can hear about these causes that are important to you and spread the word. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. And anyone who's listening, I'm always happy to chat about the work Innovation Law Lab does, or B Corps or cooperatives or anything else. I'm pretty easy to find online or on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cameron. It was really a tremendous conversation.
Thanks
for having me. It was a real pleasure. Yeah.
Thanks, Cameron, so much.